Hello and welcome to our video, where I'll discuss 12 of the best gaming titles that work on Mac and were released this year. When deciding what games to pick, I tried to balance my personal opinion with the general gaming community consensus and the game's critical reception. I also decided to stick to more popular names that have a bigger player bases at the time of making the video. Also, be on the lookout for the similar title suggestions for each game that I'll show on your screen. All of them are playable on Mac too. One final clarification before I begin. This is a list of games that you can download and run locally with your Mac's hardware. This includes titles that already have a native Mac OS port, as well as ones you can play through translation layers like Crossover or Kegworks. I will not include games that can only be streamed to a Mac via cloud gaming, though all of the titles in this list are available in one cloud platform or another. To learn how to play a game using workarounds, check its respective tutorial video linked below. With this out of the way, let's jump right in with our first title for today. We are starting with a big AAA title that surprisingly has a native macOS port. Assassin's Creed Shadows finally hits Japan, and visually it looks amazing. Runs amazing too, with the right hardware. While Shadows is well optimized for Mac, this is still a very graphically demanding game, which means you can't just run it on a base M1 or M2 MacBook Air. You'll need at least an M2 or M3 Pro with 16, or better yet, 24 gigs of memory. As for the game itself, the dual protagonist system adds some variety, and the return to more stealth-heavy gameplay is appreciated. But under the surface, a lot of familiar problems are still here. The world feels a bit static, side quests blur together, and mechanically it doesn't do much that the series hasn't already done before. It's not the disaster some people make it out to be, but it's not a masterpiece either. Schedule 1 lacks a native Mac port, but there are a bunch of easily accessible ways to run it on a Mac, which you can learn more about in our dedicated video. For now, all you need to know performance-wise is that this is a very lightweight title that will run on any Apple Silicon machine without much difficulty. But what about the game itself? Well, it's a weirdly compelling drug-dealing sandbox that looks like it belongs on a dusty PS2 disc, but somehow it works. You run your little empire, dodge the cops, and expand turf. It's janky, yet addictive, and it blew up on Steam, probably because there's nothing else quite like it. It's still in early access, so it's rough around the edges, but if you're into gritty, messy indie experiments that punch above their weight, there's a lot to mess with here. R.E.P.O is another title that lacks native support, but is easily playable on a Mac with the methods we've shown in our separate video. Like Schedule 1, it's a lightweight title that will work on any Apple Silicon machine, including base M1 and M2 MacBook Air models. R.E.P.O is a co-op survival horror game, but one that leans more toward a hilarious disaster than actual terror. And that's kind of the point. You're grabbing fragile loot while avoiding monsters in randomized facilities, and the moment-to-moment gameplay is tense and ridiculous. And just like Schedule 1, it became an overnight Steam hit that's still going strong. Yes, it's not without downsides like visual bugs and balancing issues, but all of it is compensated for by the genuinely fun gameplay. At the time of making this video, Inzoi is still not native for Mac, but that's going to change pretty soon, so there's not much point in talking about workarounds. Now, I cannot give you exact info on what native performance to expect, but I am pretty sure an M2 Pro with 16 gigs will do an okay job at running it with medium graphics at around 50 to 60 FPS. We'll just have to wait and see. The game itself wants to be The Sims on steroids, but the ambition gets ahead of the execution. The scale is impressive, entire city simulations, AI-driven citizens, full customization, but it ends up feeling disconnected. The visuals are polished and hyper-detailed, but the AI is janky, the life sim mechanics are shallow, and the UI is annoying. The game's not all bad and has potential, but it's not quite finished at this point. R.E.P.O also isn't supported for Mac, so you'll have to use Crossover, and since this is quite a demanding title, you'll need at least an M2 or M3 Pro with 24 GB to run it properly. 16 gigs could also work, but you'll need to use very low graphics, which I don't recommend for this game because it's gorgeous and deserves to be played with as much eye candy as possible. And it's not all visuals either. R.E.P.O is an excellent game in all aspects, so I am super glad that it's possible to play it on a Mac. It's a turn-based RPG that tries something new, and it actually sticks the landing. The combat blends tactics and action, the setting is surreal and gorgeous, and it doesn't feel like it's trying to copy any one thing. And don't even get me started on the story. Seriously, don't. Just go and play the game for yourself. You won't regret it. The remastered version of Oblivion is another title that requires Crossover or a similar tool to play on a Mac. While it's quite easy to get it to run, I've got to be honest, do not expect an amazing performance if you are on anything below an M2 Max with 32 gigs. The use of translation takes its toll on performance, so if you don't want choppy gameplay and potato graphics, you'll need hefty hardware. The game itself is the same old open-world fantasy RPG where you create your own hero and explore the vast province of Cyrodiil. You fight monsters, join guilds, delve into dungeons, and shape the fate of an empire. The remaster just brings it back, wrapped in a sharper, smoother modern package, and, for me and most other fans, that's enough. The Unreal Engine 5 facelift gives the world new life. The combat's less clunky, and the UI is finally bearable. It's a remaster done right, and I am all here for it. Cyberpunk 2077, probably the biggest title to come to Mac this year. Sure, the game itself got released in 2020, but it's still relevant today, and it's actually in a much better state now than it was when it first launched. If you aren't familiar with this game, it's the ultimate dystopian high-tech future title with cybernetics, brain implants, high-tech weaponry, gunfights, and crime. Lots of crime. This is one of the most ambitious titles in recent gaming history, and though it got off to a rough start, it's gradually gotten closer to its true potential. Performance-wise, I was pleasantly surprised at how well they've optimized it for Mac. As long as you have 16 gigs of memory, you can run it on any Apple Silicon chip, though I recommend at least an M1 or M2 Pro. Obviously the game is demanding, so you'll have to adjust graphics according to your hardware, but I can't complain with the performance I got during my tests. Night Rain was another pleasant surprise in terms of performance. I ran it on my M2 Max with 32 gigs through Crossover and got a stable 80 FPS at medium settings. For reference, this is about the same performance you'd get if you tried the original Elden Ring on a Mac. In other words, as long as you have a Mac with 16 gigs and one of the Pro chips, you'll be able to play this. Just remember to adjust the graphics according to your hardware. But what about the game itself? It takes the best parts of the OG Elden Ring, like the tight combat and unpredictable encounters, and compresses them into a fast-paced co-op roguelike that's surprisingly engaging. When it works, it really works. Bosses feel intense, loot progression is addictive, and team synergy matters. It's definitely a deviation from the usual Soulsborne formula, but I wouldn't say this makes it inherently worse, just different. Split Fiction is an adventure title that shares a lot of its DNA with It Takes Two, but it brings the core concept of two-player co-op to new heights, both in terms of spectacle and gameplay. You and your partner play as two writers, a sci-fi and a fantasy one, and both are trapped into the imaginary world created by the other and must work together to escape. Definitely recommend it if you've got a gaming buddy, but you can also try it with random players and have just as much fun. No one's surprised the game isn't native to Mac, but it works really well in Crossover. No significant bugs and decent performance as long as you've got 16 or more gigs of memory. Obviously, if you want to enjoy more of the game's pretty graphics and still have playable FPS, an M1 or M2 Max is recommended, but a Pro chip will still get the job done as long as you go for the lower settings. Stellar Blade is another title where you'll need Crossover or another translation layer to run it on Mac. You'll also need a decently powerful machine since this game is quite graphically intensive. I recommend a Pro chip with 24 gigs, since 16 may not be enough to play it comfortably without lowering the graphics too much. But if you've got the required hardware, you get to enjoy one of the most stylish and technically polished action games in recent memory. Combat is responsive, precise, and looks amazing in motion. Expect solid boss fights, fluid animations, and satisfying gameplay. Yeah, characters and story might not be on the same level, but that's not why you came to this game anyway. One big bonus, especially for Mac players, is that you can try its free demo to test performance, which perfectly pairs with Crossover's 14-day free trial, so you don't lose anything for trying it out. I just played The Last of Us Part 2 on an M3 Max MacBook using the D3D metal translation layer in Crossover, and I have mixed feelings about performance. It's stable, with no significant bugs or crashes, but too much is lost in the translation, so I had to really lower the settings to get a consistent 60 FPS. This is definitely one of the heaviest titles on this list, and you just need those 32 gigs of memory to play it in this way. If you do have the hardware to run it, you are in for a pretty deep game in terms of story and characters. If you like games that tug at your heartstrings and do all they can to get you to cry, this one's for you. Not to say there's a shortage of zombie fighting nail-biting sequences, but there's also something beyond that, which I personally appreciate a lot in a game. Lastly, I want to talk about Dead Island 2, another big title with actual macOS support. The game is another successful port that runs pretty well even on less potent. More specifically, you can expect around 60 FPS at medium settings and 1080p resolution on an M4 chip. Obviously, if you are on an M1 or M2 MacBook Air, it won't run well, but anything beyond that should do fine. Admittedly, Dead Island 2's reception is more mixed compared to other titles on this list, but since we rarely get AAA games with Mac support at launch, I still included it. At its core, it's a fun, bloody zombie-killing mess. The gore system is genuinely impressive, the setting is detailed and vibrant, and the different slayers give combat nice variety. However, the missions lack variety. There's a cookie-cutter story, and progression gets repetitive fast. Still, not a terrible game, just nothing super impressive aside from its visuals. So that's the end of our list. Did you like the games? Did you hate them? Or do you have other suggestions? Tell us in the comments. And while you are at it, smash those like and subscribe buttons and check out these other videos. I know you'll like them. Till next time.